First story. Halloween has always been the most fun and anticipated holiday for me. I love designing costumes, throwing scary parties, and collecting candy. But last year, my life changed forever, and this holiday turned into a real nightmare. My friend Amy and I decided to have a Halloween party at her house. We invited friends, decorated the house with pumpkins and gallows, and found the scariest costumes: death dolls, zombies, and ghosts. We looked great. The party started off fun. We laughed, joked, and everything seemed wonderful. But when it came time to play truth or dare, everything changed. One of the tasks that fell to me was strange. I was asked to go to an abandoned house next door where, as legend said, terrible things happened. At first I thought it was a joke, but my friends insisted. Mixed feelings of fear and attraction pushed me to go. Amy said she would come with me, and we took a lamp and headed into the darkness. The abandoned house looked ominous, with broken windows and walls covered in mold. We entered and began to explore the rooms, but inside it was even more frightening. We heard rustling and scary sounds, and my nerves began to tremble. Suddenly, the light began to flicker, and I felt as if someone or something was following us inside the house. We rushed to the exit, but the door slammed, and we were locked inside. The lamp went out, and strange shadows began to flicker around us. We screamed and knocked on the door, but no one came to help. Suddenly I heard a whisper, as if calling me. We turned and saw a figure in a black suit standing in the corner of the room. She had no face, only two sparkling red eyes. Now we were trapped. The creature was closing in, and our future was becoming increasingly bleak. Halloween, which promised to be fun and scary, turned into a real nightmare, and we were its prisoners. A creature with red eyes was approaching us, and my heart began to beat so fast that I could feel it in my ears. Amy and I were fighting senselessly for every breath, but the air was getting heavier. I tried to contact friends who were outside this house, but my phone seemed to be turned off. The creature came even closer, and I could clearly see its appearance. It was dressed in a black suit, hung with colorful ribbons, like a puppet. His red eyes sparkled, and I felt that they were piercing me, penetrating into my deepest subconscious. The creature raised its hand, and I heard a whisper that sounded like hundreds of voices at once. It asked, "What are you willing to do to survive?" My thoughts at that moment were mixed with fear, and I could not even answer clearly. In response, the creature came even closer and began to sing a strange song, as if bewitching me. My reality began to blur, and I felt like I was drifting into a dream world where anything was possible. Amy and I were caught in this cosmic spiral, and I knew that in order to survive, we needed to find a way out of this nightmare trap. But how? This was a question to which I did not yet have an answer. Our Halloween turned into a real nightmare, and I couldn't imagine how it would end. Second story. When I was a child, Halloween was my favorite holiday. I loved dressing up in scary costumes, running around neighbors, and asking for sweets. It was a fun tradition, and I looked forward to this holiday every year. On the day when I was only 10 years old, I took my best zombie costume and went outside in search of sweets. My parents told me to be careful and not to take anything other than the candy they gave me. But as it turned out, I couldn't help myself. Along one of the streets in my neighborhood, I came to a house that looked strange. It was covered in dark patterns, and the windows were covered with black curtains, but there was a sign on the door that the most delicious candies in the city were being handed out here. I rang the bell, and the door opened. A strange man wearing a Jack the Killer mask stood in the doorway. He handed me a bag of candy, and I started filling it. But as I was about to leave, he said, "Wait, boy, I have something else for you." He took out from his pocket a small box wrapped in black paper. I took it and examined it. It was a red ball. It seemed strange to me, and I asked, "What is this?" The man smiled and said that this was not just a ball, but a magical one that would make my Halloween special. He suggested that I cheat him, and I did. But the moment the ball flew into the sky, I felt frozen with fear. Suddenly, my world changed. I found myself in some dark place, surrounded by other children my age who were also holding red balloons. We were locked in this place, and a man wearing a Jack the Killer mask was looking at us, smiling. Many years have passed since then, but the memories of that Halloween never leave me. I don't know what was in that ball, but it led me and other children to a place where a nightmare awaited us. This Halloween was a source of fear and mystery for me, and I will never forget it. We children were locked in this dark place, and a man wearing a Jack the Killer mask stood in front of us, happily watching us hold the red balloons. Our fear and bewilderment were so palpable that I could feel the hairs on my arms stand on end. The man began to talk to us, telling us that these balls were magical and could bring our wishes true. He said that we should make our wishes and blow up the balloons, and then they will come true. He added that we must be very careful in choosing our desires, as they are not reversible. All the children, including me, were confused. We thought about what we would like, and each of us inflated our own balloon. Suddenly, the balls began to slowly rise into the air, and the magic began to work. My desires were modest. I wanted to go home and forget about this nightmare. But my hope was in vain. The ball began to blur in the air, and a mystical shadow appeared inside it and wrapped itself around me. I felt my consciousness slowly disappearing, and I was losing control of my body. The next thing I remember is that I found myself on a cold stone floor, surrounded by other children. We were in a dungeon, and the looks of the other children were filled with horror. We were trapped and had to band together to try to find a way out. In this dark dungeon, we found traces of past participants of this game. The walls were covered with their drawings and messages written in blood. We knew we had to find a way out before the masked man came back for us. So, our Halloween, which was supposed to be fun and scary, turned into a real nightmare, and we found ourselves in it. Trials and dangers awaited us, and we had to fight for our freedom and try to get out of this ominous dungeon. Third story. Halloween has always brought an atmosphere of mystery and fun to my city. All the residents of our area were preparing for this holiday, decorating their houses, coming up with scary costumes, and preparing for the evening candy run. And I was also ready for this holiday. That evening I put on my scariest costume, a zombie costume. I thought I looked quite scary. I headed outside with a candy bag and was ready for a fun evening. At some point I noticed that someone was following me. It was a man in a black robe, and he was dressed like a scream. When he approached me, I thought he was just another fun Halloween party, and we started chatting about our costumes. He told me that his scream costume was his favorite, and that he really loved this holiday. We started talking about our favorite horror movies, and I thought he was a pleasant conversationalist. But when we found ourselves in a secluded place, he suddenly changed. His voice became cold and indifferent, and his eyes began to sparkle with some strange light. I felt fear begin to squeeze my heart. He came too close to me, and I smelled something unclean. He whispered something incomprehensible, and came closer and closer. I realized that something very bad was about to happen. Suddenly, I heard the scream of my friends who jumped out from around the corner. They wore bright suits and carried lanterns. My friend in the screen robe, seeing that he could not continue with his vile plans, turned abruptly and ran away. We quickly got ready and ran to the house, holding each other. All this time I felt his cold eyes and the smell of his robe on me. Halloween, which was supposed to be fun and scary, turned into a real nightmare for me, and I realized that I had met a real maniac in a costume. After we returned home, I told my parents what happened. They were alarmed and immediately called the police. The local police began an investigation, and I told them everything I remembered about that strange man in the scream robe. Long weeks of investigation did not lead to concrete results. Local authorities suggested that it could simply be someone who decided to play a prank and scare children on Halloween. But I knew there was something more, that there was something truly sinister in his eyes. I could no longer be outside after dark, and Halloween, which had once been a fun holiday for me, became a source of disturbing memories. But luckily my friends were there to help me avoid something terrible that could have happened. This story will forever remain in my memory, and I will never forget that Halloween when I met someone who was hiding behind a costume and harboring evil within himself. I hope no one else faces such a nightmare on this joyful holiday. Fourth story. I remember this Halloween like it was yesterday. It all started when my friends and I decided to get together in the evening to go trick-or-treating. It was a tradition, and every year we went from one costume to another to be the worst on the street. This time we went to our small town, full of decorations and decorated houses. We were in a good mood, ready for adventure, and of course, lots of candy. Although I was always careful and did not take anything except the sweets that were given, this time something happened. On one of the streets we came to a house that looked very mysterious. It was decorated with dark curtains, and there was a large basket of candy in front of it. We rushed there cheerfully, hoping for a good catch. The door was opened by a man in a strange suit. He was dressed in a black porthole coat and had a round hat. He said hello, and with an air of mystery, invited us to take some candy. They were arranged in strange packages, in the shape of skulls and spiders, as if they themselves were part of the holiday. We didn't notice how our bag was filled with these strange candies, and when we got home we decided to try them. But when I unpacked one of them, I saw that it didn't look like regular candy. It was made of some vile material, and had a smell that defied description. We decided not to risk trying these strange candies, and even tried to throw them away. But when we went outside, the house and its owner disappeared, as if they had never existed. Suddenly, a strange incident began. We heard the rustling of a candy box in the dark. We glanced at the bag of candies and were horrified. There were even more of these strange candies. We realized that someone cursed them, and now they have returned to us. Since then, strange events began to happen around us. At night we heard footsteps outside the window, and it seemed to us that someone was watching us. The sweet smell of candy began to sound like a curse. We realized that these candies carry something sinister, and we have to unravel their mystery before this curse consumes us completely. We decided to get to the bottom of this mystery. From that moment on, our nights became filled with searches and explorations. We were looking for information about the house from which we took these strange candies, and about its mysterious owner. First of all, we tried to find this house on the city map, but to no avail. It was as if he had disappeared from the face of the earth. We also started asking neighbors and other residents of the area, but no one knew about the existence of such a house or a strange man in a black suit. However, the more we learned about Halloween, the more it seemed to us that it might be associated with ancient rituals and magic. We found ancient legends about candy being offered to children on Halloween to pacify the spirits of evil. But what if our candy was more than just an ancient ritual? Soon we began to notice strange phenomena around us. Shadows began to follow us, their ghostly eyes flickering in the night. We heard whispers and sounds that could not be explained. There was a feeling that something was lurking in the darkness, and it was getting closer. We decided to perform a ritual to break the curse of these candies and return to our normal lives. We looked for information about the ritual in old books and collected the necessary items. The night we decided to perform the ritual was dark and damp. The winds rustled in the trees, and we felt that the forces of evil were approaching. But as soon as we started casting spells and burning the damned candies, something inexplicable began to happen. A strange light appeared in the sky, and the world around us was distorted. We felt magic colliding with magic, and in this battle we were on the front line. After a few moments, everything returned to normal. The candies turned to ashes, and the ominous shadows disappeared. But we understood that our meeting with these strange candies left many questions and secrets in our memory. Our Halloween was not just a holiday of horror, but a real test of fear and magic that we will never forget. Fifth story. I will never forget this Halloween. It started as a normal holiday, with preparing a costume and meeting friends, but soon turned into a scary story. My friends and I decided to go to a Halloween party at a house that was famous for its epic parties. We came up with different costumes, and I decided to dress up as a sinister clown. The costume was quite scary, with a red nose and dark makeup. Upon arriving at the party, we discovered that the house had been decorated in the style of a real house of horrors. Cobwebs, fluffy spiders, and even scary sounds created an amazing atmosphere. We laughed and headed inside, getting ready for an unforgettable night. The evening was fun, with jokes, dancing, and scary stories told around the fire. But as the clock approached midnight, something began to bother me. I felt like someone was watching me. I turned around and saw an unfamiliar man in a black robe, with a hood covering his face. His presence was strange and intrusive, and I felt that he was watching me. I told my friends about him, but when they looked in that direction, the man disappeared. I decided that my impressions were the result of my clown costume and imagination. But when I returned inside the house, he reappeared in front of me, as if out of thin air. I tried to talk to him, but he just nodded and disappeared. This man followed me all evening, as if playing with my nerves. I figured it was part of the Halloween fun, but when the party ended and I decided to leave, he appeared in front of me again. My fear reached its limit, and I decided to run away. I ran out of the house and ran through the dark streets, but the man in the black robe followed me, always remaining at some distance. I didn't know what to do. I was afraid to go back to the party and afraid to go to the police. I ran and ran until I was tired. But when I turned around to make sure again that the man was gone, he suddenly appeared right in front of me. I froze. My legs didn't want to move. The man raised his hand and removed his hood. I saw his face, and then fear squeezed my heart. It was the face that I saw in the mirror in the morning, my own face, but distorted by fear and madness. I had to admit that my life changed forever on Halloween, and I could never go back to a normal holiday. My own distorted mask of fear became a mask for something more sinister. The man who stood in front of me looked at me with a silent threat. I felt him studying me carefully, as if he was looking for something inside me. Then he uttered mysterious words, and the world around me began to distort. I think I lost consciousness for a few moments, and when I opened my eyes, I was surrounded by bones and graves. I was in something that was like a cemetery, but with a distorted reality. The man appeared in front of me again and said that I was now in the world of my worst nightmares. Everything around me was darkness and horror. Eternal night reigned here, and the cries of tormented souls echoed in the air. I didn't understand how I could get back into the real world again. The man claimed that he could only help me return if I completed a certain mission for him. I was trapped and could not choose otherwise. He gave me instructions and sent me on my way, and I was left alone in this dark world of nightmares. My life changed that night, and I was condemned to live in constant fear and terror until I completed the mission I was assigned. This story became my own nightmare that I could not forget. Halloween was no longer just a holiday of horror for me, but became a living reality in which I found myself trapped. And now I have to fight my own nightmares in order to regain my normal life. 6th story. This story began on Halloween night several years ago. My friends and I decided to go for a walk around our neighborhood to enjoy the holiday spirit and find the spookiest and most original decorations. We've always loved the tradition of decorating our homes and grounds to make Halloween special. We walked through the streets, admiring the variety of decorations and costumes of our neighbors. But among all this terrifying creativity, we noticed a strange pumpkin. She stood in front of one of the houses and looked different from all the others. Instead of a normal face, it was carved out to look like it was depicting something incredibly sinister. We decided to move closer to take a closer look. As soon as we approached, we noticed that this pumpkin was glowing with its own mysterious light, and its eyes seemed alive. I couldn't take my eyes off this strange pumpkin. It seemed to beckon me with its mystery. We decided to try talking to the owner of the house to find out the history of this pumpkin. The door was ajar, and we went inside. The house had the same strange atmosphere as the pumpkin. We walked through the hallways, and when we found the room where the owner probably lived, we noticed that the entire room was filled with pictures of pumpkins. Big and small, they were everywhere. Then a man in strange clothes entered the room. He looked like a puppeteer and smiled his creepy smile. He told us the story of how he found this pumpkin in the forest several years ago. She turned out to be special. She is able to fulfill wishes, but at a price that most often turns out to be too high. The man suggested we try out the pumpkin, and without thinking twice, one of my friends expressed his desire. But in response, the pumpkin lit up with a crimson light, and his screams filled the room. Suddenly, he disappeared from our eyes. We were terrified. The man explained that the pumpkin accepts something in return for granting a wish, and it seemed that it had taken our friend. We rushed to the door, but it was locked. A man with a terrible smile asked us to make our choice: stay and try to get our friend back, or leave and never see him again. We left the house, leaving behind this sinister pumpkin and the man with his terrible smile. We went back to our friends and told them what had happened, hoping it was some kind of weird joke or prank. But when we tried to find the address of this house on the map, it disappeared from all databases. It was as if he never existed. Our friend never returned. We contacted the police, but to no avail. No one could find the house or the man. We told everyone our story, but no one could believe us. Friends began to avoid us, as if we had brought something sinister with us. Over time, strange things began to happen to us. We heard whispers and saw shadows following us. Our dreams were filled with nightmares, and we could not find peace. We started looking for answers and found something surprising. It turned out that in our area there was a legend circulating about a mysterious pumpkin, which was considered alive and had supernatural powers. She could fulfill a wish, but the price for it was the soul of the one who dared to turn to her. We realized that we were victims of this pumpkin and the man who found it. We decided to find a way to bring our friend back and get rid of the curse that the pumpkin had cast. We plunged into research, studying ancient rituals and spells. We found testimonies from those who had experienced encounters with this pumpkin, and they warned us that the price for attempting to destroy the pumpkin's secret would be high. But we could not leave our friend in the hands of this sinister creature. We decided to take a risk and confront the darkness that had shrouded our lives since that Halloween. Our actions brought us to a place where reality intertwined with nightmares, and we were forced to face our own fears. The fate of our friend and the outcome of our fight with this ominous pumpkin remained a mystery. But one thing was clear: we would never experience Halloween the same way again. This holiday, like a cursed pumpkin, has left a mark on our souls that will forever remind us that even the most innocent things can hide terrible secrets. Seventh story. One cold Halloween evening, my boyfriend, Mike, decided to surprise me. He said we had an invitation to one of the most famous Halloween parties in town, and I couldn't refuse. The evening promised to be fun and filled with fun, but we definitely didn't expect mystical events this time. We arrived at the house where the party was taking place. The house was huge and impressive, with huge windows and long, dark hallways. Everything around was decorated in Halloween style. Cobwebs, skulls, flickering candles. Everything seemed atmospheric and fun until we started noticing something strange. As the evening progressed, we heard whispers and unfamiliar voices. In rooms that seemed empty, we saw fleeting shadows and heard footsteps. Mike tried to explain it away as the Halloween effect and the willingness to make scary jokes, but something inside me wouldn't let me rest. We decided to leave and return home, but when we went to the cloakroom to get our things, they were gone. We started to panic, and at that moment someone turned off the light. We found ourselves in complete darkness. Mike and I started looking for a way out and felt like someone or something was following us. In the darkness we saw only flickering candles, which slowly began to disappear. We heard whispers and noises that did not seem human. Our hearts were beating wildly, and suddenly a figure appeared in front of us. It was a man wearing a scary clown mask. He didn't move, but just looked at us. Mike and I screamed and ran for the door. We got out into the street, and only then were we able to breathe. We decided not to return to that house and go as far as possible. Mike tried for a long time to explain this with some kind of Halloween-style jokes and horrors, but I felt that something more mystical was happening in that house. We were left with this mystery and the fear that gripped us that night. After that terrible incident at the Halloween party, we decided not to return to that house and try to forget about what happened. However, that night left us with too many unanswered questions. Mike and I spent the night at a friend's house to calm our nerves, but the dreams that visited us were full of nightmares. We saw shadows, heard whispers, and saw terrible images of clowns that haunted us. We decided that these were simply the consequences of a terrible party and fears that had accumulated in our subconscious. However, after a few days, strange things began to happen. Mike began to notice that his things were moving around without his knowledge, and sometimes he saw shadows, fleeting as a prize. Eighth story. Every year when Halloween rolled around, I made sure to go looking for the most unusual decorations and pumpkins. My passion for this holiday was unparalleled, and I always tried to find something special. However, that year, when I came across a strange stand, I realized that my Halloween quest was forever changed. It happened when I was walking around my neighborhood and happened upon a small stand filled with pumpkins. At first glance, there were no signs of trouble. The pumpkins were colorful and creatively carved, but one of them caught my eye the most. This pumpkin was different from the rest. Her shape was strange. It looked like she was something alive. Her eyes were incredibly realistic, and I couldn't help but think that it was as if she was looking right at me. I asked the seller about it, and he told me that it was a special pumpkin created as part of a secret experiment. He claimed that she had magical properties and could grant a wish if a certain price was paid. I decided to try it. I asked for something incredible, and the pumpkin lit up with a mystical light. I was scared, but before anything happened, the seller stopped me. He said that fulfilling wishes with this pumpkin was fraught with consequences and suggested that I choose another pumpkin. I agreed and chose a regular one, but the strange pumpkin did not leave my thoughts. In the evenings, I heard whispers and felt watching eyes. It seemed to me that a strange pumpkin was watching me. I tried to forget about her, but it was impossible. One day, when I returned home, I found her in my room, and her eyes were looking straight at me. I threw this pumpkin, but it came back again and again. I felt that she wanted something from me, but I could not understand what it was. Every day she became closer and closer, and my life turned into a nightmare. My passion for Halloween led me to this strange pumpkin, and I was willing to pay any price to get rid of it and get my normal life back. The fear of this strange pumpkin began to consume me. My night was interrupted by nightmares where she followed me through dark corridors and whispered cryptic words. I felt that it was beginning to influence my consciousness, and this scared me most of all. One day, when I was returning home after work, I saw that my apartment was covered in pumpkins. This strange pumpkin was at the center of all the events. It was carved in the shape of a human head, and I couldn't help but feel like it wanted to become a part of me. I realized that she needs an owner, and she is ready to do anything to achieve her goal. I decided to get rid of this pumpkin once and for all. By force of will, I carried her out of the apartment and carried her into the forest. There I broke it into pieces and buried it in the ground. I hoped that this would help, but the feeling that she was still watching me did not leave me. As time passed, the nightmares disappeared, and I began to feel better. But sometimes at night, when the candlelight flickers in the neighbors' houses, I feel the touch of this strange pumpkin on my soul. Her influence was much stronger than I could have imagined. My passion for Halloween remains the same, but now I'm careful when choosing decorations and pumpkins. I know that even in the most ordinary things, something mystical and dangerous can be hidden. Now I am careful and attentive, because Halloween is a time when the mystical and the real can intertwine, and no one knows what awaits us on this night.